Once again, apologies if you can hear music drifting from down below. You're not hearing angels, you're not hearing voices. Younger brother's playing some like choral piece and it's loud. He knows I'm filming, but you gotta let people do what they're gonna do, I guess. Today's video is going to be my December wrap up. I'm so excited because it's my final wrap up for 2024 and also the final video I do before I do my kind of end of year content, which is a video where I run through every single book I read and also a video where I talk you through my top 10 books of the year. Most people filmed these ages ago and I'm very, very late on it, but the thing is, there's just physically not enough time to fit in all the end of year, beginning of the year content. But unlike most people, I am the only one who's behind on all this, and that's because most people film their like December wrap up before they've even finished all the books they've read in December, or they film their every single book I've read this year before they've finished all the books they're going to read for the year. I make these videos almost as much for myself as a way of kind of record keeping. I really want these videos to be accurate and like actually a good representation of my reading life, and that involves kind of giving myself the time to actually finish the month before I talk through my monthly reads. So without further ado, let's get into the video because I've got 6 books to mention here. So the first book I finished in December, and I say finished because I started this many months ago. I used to be Charming the Rest of Eve Babitz by Miss Eve Babitz. Basically a big majority of her pieces that were not included in her other works. So this is not the place to start with Babitz. However, it was the place I started because I started this book in May when I went to California. I went to San Francisco and I wanted some San Francisco writing to take with me, and the only thing I had was this Babitz collection because it actually has a couple of pieces that were written about San Francisco specifically. I didn't want LA when I was going to San Francisco because the two places are very different, but Babitz does a lot of LA writing within her California writing. That was the reason why I chose this book, and I don't think this was like a terrible place to start. I obviously can't tell you fully because I haven't read any work beyond this piece, but it was definitely a long read. This has so many little stories in. How many are there? It doesn't say how many, but there's literally like reams and reams of them, and some of them are only a couple of pages, some of them are quite long. And on top of that, we've got 2 longer pieces. We've got I Used to Be Charming, which is the titular article, and that is about this accident that Eve Babitz had in which she drops a lit match onto her lap. 3rd-degree burns, I think, from the waist down. Horrific. And the other thing we have here is actually like a little novella called Fiorucci, which is detailing the rise and success of the Italian brand Fiorucci. I really enjoyed this collection. Obviously I had mixed feelings, but as you can see here, hopefully you can see this, I rated every single little article individually, and so I added them all up. It took me a very long time and divided it by how many there were and whatever. 3.5 overall, so 3.5 stars. I feel like it's pretty good going for a massive collection of different pieces. Some of these were like 2 stars and some of them were 5 stars, and some of them I still think about quite frequently, whereas others I just trudged through. But Eve Babitz's writing is very kind of colloquial and familiar. She feels like you're her friend and she's taking you along to these places. These are interview pieces mostly, but because she got along so well with the people she was interviewing, and also because of her style of interviewing, it meant that she could like spend time with these people, so you get like a glimpse into their world, not just what they decided to portray to her. My 5-star articles were Sunday, Blue Pool Sunday, Jim Morrison is Dead and Living in Hollywood, Great Legs, Girls Town, and I Used to Be Charming. And all the rest fell somewhere between 4.5 and I think 2 stars was my lowest rated one. Yeah, I think that's right. So yeah, that was my first read. I'm so glad I managed to tick this off. It was very enjoyable. I definitely preferred it a lot more when I kind of knuckled down to finish it because, like I said, I read a good chunk of this in May and then I kind of drip fed myself it throughout the rest of the year, and then I read a good like 1/3 of the rest of this book just in December. Okay, the music downstairs is incredibly loud, so I'm sorry if you can hear it because I'm certain you can. But next book we have is Eileen by moshfegh. So this is my 3rd moshfegh. I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and then I read Lapvona. My Year of Rest and Relaxation I felt was a little bit overrated, but Lapvona I really did enjoy. Enjoy is probably not the right word for it because it was not a very enjoyable read. It felt like studying a school text, you know, and so I got like a lot of, I found it very interesting and enjoyed the experience of reading it, but I didn't enjoy the actual content. The content is kind of questionable. But Eileen is my 3rd moshfegh, so I did know a little bit of what I was getting into. I had also heard in general that if you're not like a My Year of Rest and Relaxation girly, you're often an Eileen girly. I'm unfortunately neither, but I'm definitely not an Eileen girly. So Eileen follows Eileen. She's in her early 20s and she works at a boys' prison, so a prison for juvenile boys. She has a terrible life. She lives with her alcoholic father. She's miserable. Set across the winter season, it's a brutal winter. Everything is just awful in Eileen's life. She has a terrible view of her appearance. She's got very kind of disordered eating habits, and on the whole is just not living her best life at all. Far from it. Set across a very kind of short period of time within Christmas where this figure enters Eileen's life, Rebecca. And Rebecca is this kind of light. She's this like effervescent outpouring of energy and change within Eileen's life. And Eileen thinks that Rebecca is her ticket out of her town. So I found this pretty uninteresting, pretty underwhelming. A lot of this book is the build up to this final very like dramatic event. The ending was a bit of a letdown considering how much we'd had building up to it. Like if this had been slightly less of a build up, the ending would have really shocked me, but the ending felt a little bit anticlimactic just because of how much we'd had to trudge through to get there. Please can you turn it down very slightly? I also have found with a lot of Ottessa's work that it just feels like shock for shock's sake. She writes something kind of outlandish or really, really disgusting just for the sake of shocking the reader, which I feel like is really boring when you actually think about it, but that could just be like a personal opinion. I kind of like read these scenes and I'm like, that's a bit gross, but like it's not adding anything to the story necessarily. I would also definitely recommend checking trigger warnings with this book because there are multiple difficult subject matters throughout the book, but particularly the very end scene did make me very, very uncomfortable. The book doesn't really dwell on what happened necessarily, but it definitely does feature a subject that's very difficult to read about, to consume, especially as that is centered around child abuse, which is just a horrific thing. And then to kind of get this particular type of that thing in this book was just awful. The book didn't go into detail, like I said. It mentions a topic that even if you're not going into detail on is just horrendous to think about, and also one that occurs within real life, so just dwelling on it even for like 5 seconds is going to be unenjoyable. But if you have any sort of like triggers surrounding that subject, then you will, I think, definitely want to look into it before you get into the book because it does kind of spring out on you and it's very, very difficult to read about. What is this lunch?
Got pie, jelly.
Enough food there.
You want my jumper?
Yeah, I bet you will.
Thanks.
Eileen has been adapted into a film and I am definitely interested in reading that. I am slightly worried for how horrible it might be. The end scene particularly, but also just like general vibe of the book is pretty dire. The film's meant to be pretty loyal adaptation. I feel like they might just capture it being brought to life in terms of me being able to see it like visually instead of just reading it. Might be a little bit too much, but we'll see. I might even start it and then see how I go. But yeah, that was Eileen by moshfegh. She's being unhauled. Just didn't love it, but that's fine. And definitely my least favourite moshfegh, 2 stars. Okay, then I picked up Spectacular by Stephanie Garber. I actually read this one in a reading vlog, so I'm not going to go into massive detail on it, but I will link the vlog in the cards and also down below because this was a very difficult read. This was very like up in the air. I had very kind of mixed feelings with it, and I went into a lot of detail on my thoughts and feelings and kind of showed you my process of thought in regards to some of like a couple of the scenes that happened in this book, particularly towards the end. So I'll link the vlog down below, but I'll also include a timestamp where I'm specifically like going in depth on this book because it is a festive reading vlog. And I don't know about you guys, but the second that Christmas is over, I don't want to hear about it, so I totally get if you're the same too. So Spectacular is the novella that follows the Caravel series. I love the Caravel series, it's one of my favourites. I would say it's a 5-star series, though none of the books in it have been 5 stars. The first was a 4, the second was a 4, and the third was a 4.5. I just wonder if those books could never reach a 5-star rating. The way that she writes YA is very YA, and I'm just not within that reading age anymore. I definitely think I would enjoy the books more had I read them back in the day. I read the first book actually in 2018 and I think I connected with it a lot better then because I was closer to the reading age. But despite this book being very YA, there is one scene in particular that does not feel very YA, and it really threw me off because it is a little bit questionable. I think like on paper it would seem really questionable, but like when you're reading the story it makes a little bit more sense because of what our characters know and the sequence of events leading up to this thing happening and those after. But if you took some of these lines out of context, they really would seem quite alarming, particularly for a YA audience. But Spectacular follows our main characters throughout the Caravel series, Scarlet and Julian and Teller and Legend. But this has particular emphasis on Teller and Legend, which disappointed me a little bit because my favourite couple is Scarlet and Julian, mostly because of Julian. He's literally like the love of my life, to put it lightly. This book is really beautiful, like visually. It's very beautifully illustrated, and it was definitely a book that kind of got me in the festive mood. I just didn't know where I stood with those things towards the end. It was just very strange, and I wish that Stephanie Garber had neglected to include them because it would have been so much better had this book not had that scene in particular. As it stood though, I gave it a 3-star. It did definitely get me in that kind of Christmas mood, and I love the characters. I just love this world so much, and anything within it is going to be one that I enjoy, but it could never be higher than 3 because of that scene. I just think it was very, very strange. If you know what I'm talking about, let me know your thoughts down below because I'd love to hear what other people think on it. There's very few bad reviews of this book on Goodreads, but the ones I have read do tend to mention that final scene. Well, not final scene, but one of the final scenes. But yeah, look at this. Isn't this beautiful? I also do think this book is massively overpriced. £17 for this tiny hardcover. But yeah, I originally rated this 3.5 and I think it's a 3-star reflection. Next up I read Frost by Crawford, which is a kind of indie romantasy book. It's not a novella, but it reads like a novella. It's a very, very short little book. I think it's like 200 and something pages, or maybe like just 300. I read this book because I've been recommended a book called Avalon Tower by the same author, but that is massive, so I wanted to get a little taste of her writing before I committed to like a longer book by her. This book was really, really badly written, and that does make me worry slightly for Avalon Tower, but maybe the author will improve by then, or maybe I'll just have to pick it up when I'm in the mood to read something that's a little bit, I hate to say it, but like kind of trashy. And I definitely think I would have rated this book lower had I not connected to a couple of things in it. So in this book we're following this girl, I can't remember her name, which is great. So yeah, we follow this girl and we start on this day where I think she gets home from work and she walks in on her long-term boyfriend. Maybe it was even her fiance, or maybe she thought they were like just about to get engaged or something like that. Anyway, he is cheating on her and she's like, this is terrible. Understandably so. And not only is he cheating on her, but he's cheating on her birthday, the icing on the cake. So what she does is she goes across the bar, gets absolutely off her face drunk. Again, understandably. She's a fae, but she's living in the human world. In the fae world, there's this fae prince, and he is looking for a wife, and he needs a wife in order to basically restore the health of his kingdom in terms of like the nature and everything like that. So he has agreed to do this program in which he basically is like the bachelor, and then he invites a bunch of kind of potential suitors to then be matched up with and then eventually marry, hopefully. And so he's like walking around the human land, kind of like seeing, I don't even know what he's doing. Is he looking for potential people to be in the show? And everyone's like freaking out because they're obsessed with this fae prince. But our main character could not give less of a stuff. She's in the bar, the interviewer for the TV is like going around interviewing everybody, and I don't remember what she says, but she basically like disses the prince and she thinks that he's just like this jumped up loser. This program's ridiculous. Why would anyone care about it? Now, it turns out that the prince is actually completely uninterested in getting married, needs someone to restore the health of his kingdom in order to be a good prince, but he also is not wanting to get married. So he decides to make an alliance with the main character. He kind of helps her through these trials to guarantee that she's the winner so that they can marry for like 3 months, restore the health of the kingdom, and then break up. So our main character gets swept away to the Fae lands and she goes with her human best friend. Their relationship was so much fun. The prince kind of didn't have any personality, but also didn't really mind that massively because we didn't have a lot to do with him. A lot of it was just following our main character and whatever she got up to within these trials. The trials were absolutely brutal. Yeah, some of this book is like a little bit dark in terms of the trials. On the whole, it's just like a fun fae fantasy romance, I guess. There's very little romance. There's like basically no spice, which really surprised me. Though it does kind of get weirdly raunchy out of nowhere. Nothing actually happening, but the prince's dirty talk comes out of nowhere. That was a bit weird, but on the whole, badly written, but a lot of fun. I particularly enjoyed the narrative about the main character's ex and like their drama after breaking up, with her best friend and herself like encourages herself to move along and just like continue with her life despite the heartbreak she's been through. So overall, go with 3 stars, probably realistically more of a 2.5 or even a 2, but it just was too much fun for me and I just connected to some things in it. Right, so I actually forgot one book before this, and that was Clean Point by Meg Jones. This is a tennis romance book, and the reason why I forgot it is because I DNF'd it. The reason why I DNF'd it is because tennis to me is a summer sport. I mean, it is a summer sport, but at the same time, like, it is happening all the way throughout the year because the professional tennis players chase the summer season. Wimbledon rolls around, I am obsessed with tennis. This is a book that I picked up around Wimbledon season and then I put it down, I don't even know why, but I put it down about 12% in. I was wanting to pick it up, I wanted to finish it off before the end of the year. I found out that the audiobook was coming out on Spotify on like the 22nd of December or something like that, so I was like, okay, I'll wait till then and then I can just read this via audiobook. That was all going well until I started reading it via audiobook. Why am I on the phone? I was like, this is not the time to be reading this book. It just felt so summery. I have to wait basically until Wimbledon season. So June or July, I'll probably most likely revisit this book. So it's definitely a soft DNF. It also was a lot of fun. I was enjoying my time with it. Well written and just like a fun tennis romance. Like, that sounds like ideal to me. And also nothing I've ever read before. So I was really excited about this one. I still am super excited. I just don't think that now or in December was the right time to be reading this. Okay, and then the final book that I read in the month of December was also my favourite book that I read in the month of December. And that was A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. Third and final book in the Curse for True... No, what the heck? Once Upon a Broken Heart series. This is a trilogy, like I said. So far, the books have been... They've always been slight letdowns because people rave and rave about this series, particularly the second book. The first book I gave 4 stars. The second book I gave 4.5, and I've since lowered it to a 4. And this final book I gave a 4.5 star. This is the underdog. This is the book that people hate on. People who are diehard fans of the first 2 books get to this one and they're like, Stephanie Garber, you like really dropped the bundle. She picked it up. I really truly don't get why people don't like this one. Although having said that, I did have a think about it and I was like, for some reason this series, I mean, it's marketed as romantasy. To me it's just YA fantasy. It just has like a romance subplot. I think that was one of the problems with it actually. The lack of romance throughout the first couple of books. Like, it didn't match up with what I'd been told about the series. Because of the marketing of this book, it does kind of attract romance girlies. People out there who read primarily romance books and are kind of dipping their toes into fantasy. And I feel like this book was the one that like had the, I don't know, To me, it was like the deepest level of romance was found in this book as opposed to the other ones. There was definitely less time spent with our main couple, the couple you're kind of rooting for, which to me made this a far more interesting series, and also, like I said, meant that the love that we did get felt deeper than what we'd had throughout the previous 2 books. So I wonder if people were disappointed in this because it didn't feature enough of Evangeline and Jax, who are our main couple. But I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was just good from like start to finish. I felt like the pacing was perfect. I read this very, very quickly. I read it in a couple of days because I was aiming to get it finished before the end of the year. But yeah, Cause the True Love follows Evangeline. She is just a breath of fresh air. She's so light and happy and positive and hopeful and wonderful, but her fatal flaw is that she's in love with this guy, is basically betrothed to someone else. So she prays to Jax, who's the Prince of Hearts, and he steps in. And the idea is that he's going to help her, you know, get this guy. Things don't work out exactly as Evangeline had planned or had wanted them to happen, which is the understatement of the century. But also it sends her on this quest, doing everything at the will of Jax, because she has agreed to give him these 3 kisses in exchange for his help. So he does help her, but he also makes her life a bit of a mess. As well as the deeper love, I felt like this book was just in general much deeper than I thought it might have been, and I loved the themes that were discussed in it. It was also really, really funny. There were lots of scenes that I laughed out loud at, and it also was a little bit dark. Like there were some moments where people, you know, actually got killed in various ways, and like the ending of this is pretty dark. Like what happens to our antagonist. I love the multiple POVs we got. We got Evangeline, and we also got, what was his man? Apollo. So I read the first 2 books earlier in the year, and I left a big gap between book 2 and book 3. That was for a reason I'm not going to get into, but I'm actually super glad that I did do that, because there was so much in this book that I connected with that I wouldn't have done had I read this even like 4 months ago. There was so much hope, there was so much truth, there was so much beauty in this book, and I just feel like it's so underrated. Not the series. The series is beyond time, but this book particularly, like, go into it with the right idea. I think that's the main thing. Go into it knowing that this book is not going to be like super Jax heavy, but it also is the most beautiful kind of love story, given how we end off book 2 at, and the way that these 2 characters have to kind of come back to each other. I also love Evangeline. I think she's such a, like I said, breath of fresh air, particularly within the fantasy genre. She's not this kind of like brutal, super strong, naturally gifted at fighting skills queen. She's very feminine. She has a really like positive outlook on life, like I said, and she also is very sweet and like good-hearted. She wears her heart like on her sleeve. Her personality is very much present the second that you meet her. There's so much character development for her throughout the series. I also particularly love the settings that we got in this book. We go all the way around the map. A lot of it was really reminiscent of how I imagined Elfame in the Folk of the Air series, so The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing. I love that series, particularly for how like vivid it was in that way, particularly with the world building. This book I felt like had, I don't know what it was actually about it that made me feel this way, but there were definitely like elements of that story that were like within this one, just in terms of like the general vibe of it and the settings and things like that. Why is this not a 5-star? You may be asking. I'm also asking that question. I do think that maybe I don't think these books could ever be 5 stars, just like I said, because I'm out of the YA reading age now. And I do wonder if a YA book could ever again be a 5-star read for me, which is kind of heartbreaking to say. I just don't think these books are going to hit the same for me. They have everything that is needed, but they just don't reach that 5-star feeling. And this is obviously not kind of rereads of my old favourites, like the Folk of the Air series and what else is there, Six of Crows and stuff like that are still like 5-star reads. I just feel like I'm always a little bit let down with YA in this way that I can't even put a finger on, because it's something about the writing style or something like that, I don't know. I'm just not the intended audience. I think that's the thing. So it makes sense that I am not going to fully connect with these books. But yeah, there's always a little part of me that's like slightly disappointed, but overall this is just great and I cannot recommend this book enough. So there you have it. Those are the 6 books that I read in the month of December, or it's 5 plus a DNF, but I've got 4 of them here to show you. Just know that we're forgetting Frost and also Clean Point within this stack. It was a really mixed reading month, but I'm really happy to have got the babitz done. I'm really happy to have read a 4.5-star read. That's great. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know that you did. Like I said, you're going to want to stay tuned because you're going to want to see my list of my top 10 books of 2024. Another reason why I didn't film my 10 books of the year already, there may or may not be a book on this list that is in that video. Just saying. Sending my love to you from here to wherever you may be in the world, and I'll see you very, very soon in a couple of days for another video. Bye bye. I've just discovered the fact that I'm not wearing any lipstick. I got lip balm on my lips, but it doesn't have any tint, and I look so bad when I've got a full face of makeup and nothing on my lips. The reason is I put lip balm on when I start doing my makeup with the idea to then like rub it off and then put lipstick on or whatever I want to use at the end, but because I have lip balm on I feel like I'm wearing lipstick, like it has the same sensation as that, so I just forgot, and now I can't go back and fix it because we're literally at the end of the video and I've been yapping for way too long to do this entire thing over again, so I apologise. Hopefully I didn't too disastrous. It's just so annoying.